So I hit 42, found myself single again after a long time, and I thought, okay, this will be different. More mature, right? We're all supposed to be adults here. We've lived a bit, learned a few things. I was expecting conversations with more depth, intentions that were clearer, maybe even that straightforwardness I missed in my 20s. Honestly, I anticipated an upgrade. What I didn't see coming was feeling like I'd been chucked into an emotional particle accelerator. The sheer intensity of it all, the unexpected firsts, the baggage, mine, theirs, everyone's. It was a tidal wave. And seriously, no one gives you a heads up about the emotional shocks waiting for you. Forget everything you think you know about dating from your younger days. When I stepped back onto the scene at 42, I was picturing a calm, collected game of chess. What I got was an emotional rodeo, and I was just trying to hang on. The biggest surprise? It wasn't just about finding a partner. It was about bumping into parts of myself I thought were long gone and dealing with emotional highs and lows I just wasn't ready for. The first shock that truly sideswiped me? Ghosting. Now, I'd heard the term, obviously, but I genuinely believed it was something mostly for the younger crowd. You know, the ones still figuring out how to actually talk to people. In your 40s, surely we'd all move past just vanishing on someone. Man, I was wrong. So wrong. I remember connecting with this one woman, let's call her Sarah. We had what I thought were great chats, similar interests, easy laughs, the banter just flowed. We even made plans for coffee. The day before, I texted to confirm. Radio silence. I waited. Sent a polite follow-up a day later. Still nothing. She just disappeared. Poof. Gone into the digital ether. The shock wasn't just the rudeness, though that was definitely part of it. It was the feeling it dug up. This bizarre, almost teenage sting of rejection. Here I was, a grown man with a career, a mortgage, a life I'd built. And I'm feeling this pang that felt weirdly like being ignored by a crush in high school. It was baffling. I kept thinking, aren't we past this? Don't we know how to just say, hey, not feeling it, or something came up? Apparently, not always. And this wasn't a one-off. It happened a few more times, with different levels of connection beforehand. Each time, that same disbelief, then that flicker of old insecurity. That fear of rejection I thought I had a handle on. It felt surprisingly sharp. It was a real wake-up call that no matter your age, the silent treatment still packs a punch. It made me realize that the dating world, even in your 40s, can feel like you're lost in a galaxy of disappearing acts, where getting any kind of closure is a total luxury. This constant, low-level hum of will they vanish wasn't something I'd factored into mature dating. It also really hit home how much dating apps have changed things. With so many options, interactions can feel almost disposable. Swiping away is easy, and so is disappearing, leaving you wondering if that connection was even real. The next emotional jolt was the baggage, and I don't just mean the oh, they had a tough breakup kind. I mean, we're talking entire shipping containers of past lives, experiences, traumas, and triumphs. By your 40s, pretty much everyone comes with a history. Divorces? Common? Kids from previous relationships? Often in the picture. There are old heartbreaks, betrayals, losses, and sometimes really ingrained patterns from all that stuff. I learned pretty quick that dealing with this wasn't just about nodding along to someone else's past. It was about facing my own. My last long-term relationship hadn't ended yesterday. There were years of shared life, habits, and memories I was still carrying, often without even realizing it. I figured I'd neatly packed it all away, slapped a lessons learned label on it, and moved on. But dating again? It was like holding up a giant mirror to those supposedly neat boxes. I remember one date where we started talking about past relationships. My date was really open about her divorce, co-parenting dramas, the financial stuff that sticks around. It was a lot. But what surprised me more was how I reacted inside. I found myself comparing, contrasting, even getting weirdly defensive about my own past choices. It was like her history was poking at all my unhealed spots. Then there were the dates where the baggage was, well, right there in your face. The person who couldn't stop talking about their ex, either trashing them or getting all wistful. The one who clearly had major trust issues and was projecting old hurts onto me. And, if I'm being totally honest, there were times I realized I was the one bringing the caution tape, the prejudgments based on my own scars. This wasn't the simple, let's get to know each other vibe I'd expected. It was more like an archaeological dig. You're carefully brushing away layers, trying to figure out the person in front of you, all while being super aware of the historical context, theirs and yours. It took a level of empathy and patience I hadn't banked on needing right from the start. You have to be ready to listen without judging, to get that someone's reactions might be less about you and more about a ghost from their past. And, just as importantly, you have to be willing to look at your own stuff, too. It's this ongoing process of unpacking, understanding, and figuring out what pieces of that baggage you and they can actually carry forward together. It's not about finding someone without baggage. That's like finding a unicorn. It's about finding someone whose baggage kind of fits with yours, and who's willing to help you with yours too. This one was maybe the most disorienting, and in some ways, the most wonderful shock. I genuinely thought that certain emotional firsts were ancient history for me. Those jitters before a first date, that heart-pounding nervousness, the Japanese call it doki doki, before a first kiss, that giddy buzz of a new romantic spark. Surely that was all kid stuff for the young and inexperienced heart. I figured at 42, I'd be more stoic, more cool and collected. Wrong. So wrong. The first time I felt that old, familiar flutter of nerves before meeting someone new, I almost laughed out loud. It was like my brain was going, really? We're doing this again? But my heart, apparently, had other plans. The anticipation, picking out an outfit with way too much care, the slight shake in my hands as I reached for the car door. It was all there, just as strong as ever. It was like rediscovering an excitement I'd packed away in mothballs. And the first kiss with someone new after all those years? Whoa. It was a revelation, not just a kiss. It was a whole universe of emotions. Nervousness, sure, but also this surprising tenderness, a sense of discovery, and an almost overwhelming feeling of newness. It was like a part of me that had been asleep just got zapped awake. That feeling of renewal really gave me a fresh take on love and intimacy. This intensity wasn't just for the big romantic firsts, either. It was the first time sharing a really personal story with someone new and feeling like they actually heard me. The first time laughing until my sides ached with someone I was just getting to know. The first time feeling that spark of intellectual connection where you just want to talk for hours. Every one of these moments, things I might have brushed off in my 20s, felt incredibly significant, almost amplified by all the life lived in between. It was a shock because it totally challenged how I saw myself, this seasoned, maybe even a little cynical guy. Turns out, that capacity for almost youthful, wide-eyed emotional intensity doesn't just pack up and leave with age. It's still there, just waiting for the right moment to pop back out. And while it was startling at first, it was also incredibly humanizing. It reminded me that connecting with someone at any age is full of these powerful little bursts of feeling, and that's something to lean into, not hide from. This sense of new beginnings was amazing. One of the big assumptions I walked in with at 42 was that I'd find a generally higher level of emotional maturity and people just being straight with each other. I figured, by this age, folks mostly know what they want, can say it clearly, and there'd be less game playing than back in the day. This, I quickly found out, was a lovely idea, but often just not true. The reality of dating in your 40s is that while plenty of people are like that, a surprising number just aren't, or at least not all the time. I met people who, even though they had plenty of birthdays under their belt, seemed to be stuck in emotional patterns from their 20s. You had the commitment phobes, great at turning on the charm, but slippery as an eel when it came to anything remotely serious. Then, there were those who seemed genuinely clueless about what they were looking for, sending mixed signals that were confusing and honestly exhausting to try and figure out. Thinking everyone has done the work on themselves and reached some kind of emotional enlightenment? Yeah, that was a dangerous assumption on my part. I remember this one person I dated who was, on paper, incredibly accomplished, super confident. But when it came to talking about the relationship itself, it was like dealing with a teenager, avoidance, ambiguity, the works. Plans would be hazy, serious topics brushed off with a joke, and a general unwillingness to actually define what we were doing. It was frustrating because it was the exact opposite of the mature and straightforward vibe I was expecting. Sure, societal shifts and all that play a part, but individual emotional growth doesn't always keep pace with chronological age. This mismatch wasn't always about someone else lacking maturity. Sometimes it was just our expectations clashing. I was looking for clear communication and knowing where things stood, maybe because I felt like my time was more valuable now. Others, maybe still healing from old wounds or just enjoying casual dating, weren't on the same page. That's not necessarily a flaw on their part, but it was a shock to realize that dating in your 40s doesn't automatically mean everyone wants the same deep, committed thing, or that they go about it with the same directness. It also became pretty clear that maturity isn't a one-size-fits-all deal. Someone could be incredibly mature in their career and friendships, but still bring a whole heap of immaturity to their romantic life. Assuming that age automatically equals wisdom across the board was a big miscalculation. It was a blunt lesson. You can't judge someone's relationship readiness or how they'll communicate just by counting the candles on their last birthday cake. People are complicated, and their emotional worlds are built from a lifetime of unique stuff, not just their age. Realizing that forced me to tweak my expectations and get much better at watching what people do, not just what they say. The final, and maybe the biggest emotional shock was the sheer depth of vulnerability needed, and the vulnerability hangover that came with it, something I totally hadn't seen coming. Having been in a long-term relationship, I thought I knew all about vulnerability, but opening yourself up again after a major break, after life has definitely left a few more scars, that's a whole different animal. It's not just about sharing your hopes and fears. It's about tearing down walls you might not have even known you'd put up. I kind of expected dating in my 40s would mean having my guard up more, a self-protection thing learned from past hurts. What I found was that to make any real connection, I had to be more open, more raw than I'd been in years. And when you do that, when you lay out your true self, flaws and all, it's terrifying. There's this distinct feeling the day after a really open, honest conversation, or after sharing something from your past you hardly ever talk about. A kind of emotional rawness that leaves you feeling both lighter and incredibly fragile. That vulnerability hangover was intense. I remember one specific date where, out of nowhere, the conversation got really personal. We talked about past regrets, deep-seated insecurities, dreams we were almost too scared to say out loud. It was a powerful connection. But the next day, I felt exposed, a bit shaky, like I'd shared too much too soon. It wasn't that I regretted being honest, but the emotional toll of being that open with someone new was surprising. It really does take guts to let someone see your messy bits. What shocked me, though, was that this level of vulnerability, as unsettling as it was at first, was also the path to the most meaningful connections. The superficial chats, the carefully polished versions of ourselves we sometimes present, those didn't lead anywhere real. It was in those moments of shared vulnerability, of seeing each other's imperfect humanity, that genuine bonds started to grow. That's where the real chance for deep emotional connection and growing together actually was. This whole journey of rediscovering intimacy wasn't just about physical closeness. It was so much about emotional intimacy. It meant being willing to be seen, really seen, and to see another person that same way. It's a million miles from the often more surface-level stuff from when we were younger. In your 40s, there's often this unspoken understanding that life is messy and imperfect, and true connection comes from embracing that messiness together. It's a more conscious choice to be vulnerable, knowing the risks, but also knowing the incredible rewards of building something real. This, I realized, is what building new relationships with purpose and a bit of wisdom is all about. Looking back at this whirlwind of jumping back into dating at 42, the biggest lesson is that what I initially expected was, well, pretty naive. I thought age would just magically make everything smoother, more predictable. Instead, dating in your 40s is this profoundly emotional ride, full of unexpected highs, surprising lows, and an intensity I just hadn't prepared for. Those emotional shocks, the sting of being ghosted, the weight of all our histories, the surprising punch of new firsts, the myth that everyone's mature, and that deep dive into vulnerability. They weren't just roadblocks. They were more like forges. They forced a kind of self-reflection and growth that honestly I wouldn't trade. I've learned that being resilient isn't about dodging emotional hits, but about how you deal with them and what you learn. My self-awareness has definitely sharpened, not just about what I want in a partner, but about who I am now at this point in my life. There's a certain clarity that comes with dating in your 40s, I think. You're less likely to waste time on things that just don't fit your core values. You get better at spotting red flags, but also, hopefully, better at appreciating the green ones. The focus kind of shifts from some idealized dream of romance to a more grounded desire for real companionship, growing together, and just accepting each other. For me, this journey has been less about finding some perfect person and more about finding an authentic connection with someone who's also figuring out their own complex, imperfect life. It's about getting that emotional baggage as part of the deal, but it's how we unpack and manage it, hopefully together, that really matters. And that capacity for joy, for new experiences, for that heart-fluttering excitement, it doesn't fade with age. If anything, it can feel even more precious. So, if you're thinking about stepping back into the dating world in your 40s, or you're already here, just know this. It's not simpler, but it can be incredibly rewarding. It'll challenge you, surprise you, and yeah, sometimes it'll shock you. But it also offers chances for profound connection and self-discovery you might not see coming. The emotional landscape is definitely more complex, but it's also way richer. What about you? If you're dating in your 40s or beyond, what have been the biggest emotional shocks or surprises you've run into? I'd genuinely love to hear your experiences. Share your stories in the comments below. Let's try to figure this stuff out together. And if any of this hit home for you, please give this a like and maybe subscribe for more real talk about life and relationships. You're definitely not alone on this roller coaster.